What's going on, everyone? Adam Gelman here. We are coming off of probably one of the biggest weeks of news and wrestling cards that I have ever been a part of. And yesterday was probably one of those sort of more important days of that sort of timeline that we originally walked through in our Super Show, mainly because when this whole process started, like we knew that there were going to be many different legal battles that go on between WWE and Panini as they sort of sort through all the different aspects of this. But yesterday was really one of those major sort of things that went down. And I wanted to hop on and do a video to recap some of that, but also sort of like give some feedback on sort of where this leaves the overall process, what was sort of shared by Paul Lesko and a few other people as we get going down the path towards resolution here. So, for those of you who didn't get a chance to watch our video that we did with the Super Show panel last week as the news broke, let's do a quick recap here and then we'll sort of get into what happened at this past sort of legal hearing. So, if you go back to the national convention, WWE and Panini were going strong. There was no hint of any real sort of animosity. There was announcements that were ready to be made. Elite was put on their banners. Everything was going great. When we got back from Chicago, almost immediately there was a notification that Panini had sued Fanatics for antitrust violations, which means that over the course of their sort of consolidation plan where Fanatics has taken control of all the major licenses for Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA. WWE would be going back to them in 2026. Just a considerable amount of consolidation around auction houses, vaults, live breaking platforms, distribution, card printing, like everything. And Panini just said, you know what, that's enough. We're thinking that this is akin to a monopoly and we're going to sue. Almost immediately after that, there was a cancellation of the NFLPA license, which governs the use of the current NFL players and rookies that are not signed to individual contracts. So if Panini wanted to use, say, Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings, if they didn't have a deal with Justin Jefferson to include his likeness and his autographs, he would not be available for their usage in their sets. Then, last week, we found out that at the end of August, beginning of September, WWE had pretty much done the same thing. They had canceled their license with Panini, effective immediately. And not only that, but they took it a step further. They filed an injunction in the Southern District of New York where they wanted a temporary restraining order in place so that Panini was unable to release any future product under that terminated license. Now, the reason for that is because when you look at a canceled license, immediately somebody is going to bring a lawsuit. I mean, you can't just terminate a contract in any real business dealings that are multiple millions of dollars worth of revenue for a company and not expect some sort of legal proceeding to happen as a result of that, unless there was some clear breach of that contract. And in this case, I think both parties were sort of fighting over the language as to why that happened. As we are getting into some of the publicly available documents, including the license itself, WWE is alleging that Panini has not fulfilled their end of the bargain when it comes to production of specific elements of the contract, namely digital cards, trading card games. They didn't hit specific production goals and stuff like that. Panini immediately responded and said, yes, we did. So there was a hearing yesterday, as I'm recording, that was to determine whether or not this temporary restraining order was going to be put in place. If a judge was going to grant that temporary restraining order, it would mean that for the next 2 weeks, at least, Panini would not be able to release anything. Now, I don't think from what we were seeing on the release calendar that there was going to be a product that was going to be released over that 2 week period, maybe some Panini instant cards, maybe a few other things. but nothing major. Elite was already pushed back to November, so I don't think that there was any real pressing details, but it was a temporary order, so it wasn't something that was going to immediately impact anything Panini was doing. What it was going to do is set up a more formal hearing on a full-scale restraining order, likely that would prevent Panini from releasing anything under the license until the settlement of the litigation was complete. And I think that in itself would have been a major blow. Now, all of that is still sort of pending. There's still a lot of litigation between the suits, the countersuits for breach of contract that is going back and forth between Panini and WWE. All of that is still pending, regardless of the outcome of this hearing. So they knew that in order for this to sort of be set in motion, they were, they being the WWE, was hoping that they were going to have some relief to be able to build a case around and prevent anything from happening. Basically, they wanted the courts to intervene and say, yes, you are correct in at least halting the future release of any product while we sort this out. Panini is saying, no, you breached our contract. We wanted to be able to have the opportunity to continue our business as we go through this litigation. That all went down yesterday, and we got our first sort of shot across the bow in terms of legal proceedings. The judge in the New York district denied that restraining order for a number of reasons, but we don't have any of that publicly available. As part of WWE's filing and as part of Panini's filing, we did get a ton of information as to what they're fighting over, but we didn't get any real resolution, a reason for the resolution itself. We just know that WWE was not able to get that restraining order applied. So the judge denied that. In all likelihood, from what Paul Lesko was saying, you have to show immediate harm, and WWE, in reality, from what they were saying, did not really show any ability that Panini has caused that harm in any recent time frame. Most of what they were alleging happened, 2022, late 2022. It's been over a year in some of the cases for some of the things that were called out in the filings. So I think that to have a temporary restraining order put in place, from what Paul was saying, is pretty unlikely, and I think that's probably why it didn't go through. But the litigation is still pending. So this round one going to Panini may be a minor victory, but it is far from the overall victory in the war. Now, I think there's a lot of implications as to why this is such a gigantic deal, why this litigation is a big deal, why this temporary restraining order is a big deal. And I think it stems from so many different things that are going on within the overall consolidation plan with Fanatics. Let me restate, I said this in our original video, but let me state it again. The litigation is between WWE and Panini. Fanatics is not involved. Panini did call out that there was external parties asking WWE to get involved and remove the consideration for the license here. So there was some level that Panini is calling out Fanatics for their involvement here, but there is no litigation in this particular instance between WWE and Panini that Fanatics is involved. The only thing that we can assume is that when this license is terminated, Fanatics, i.e. Topps, is going to immediately be put into the position where they can start producing products. I don't think that that's ready to go at this particular moment, but theoretically, if Fanatics is saying your license is terminated and you no longer have a license with us, there's litigation pending from there, I'm actually still curious as to whether or not Topps can begin their sort of process towards producing cards, or if they have to wait for all of this to be sorted out. I'm sure we'll get a lot of information on that over the next probably few months as we start to see solicitations come out, or as Panini continues to do their business through the different areas of their WWE license that was supposedly terminated. So overall, like, the consolidation plan itself, this seemed to be, at least from my opinion, a test case for a lot of other things that Fanatics is likely going to be trying to do. Now, I love Topps. I love what Topps has done in baseball cards and wrestling cards. I'm a huge fan. Much of my collection has a ton of Topps cards in it. So I don't think this is really like the Topps people like pulling the strings. That's not what I'm saying. Like my my feedback here is likely that this is Fanatics corporate trying to, you know, rig the system a little bit and figure out how to enact this Thanos plan that they have been sort of working towards over the last, I don't know, 2 years and make it happen more quickly. There's probably reasons why they needed to happen more quickly, but I don't know if this litigation is really going to do anything to make that a more sort of lightning fast process. And if anything, it may slow it down. So really the crazy thing about all of this, and for the first time really in trading card history, is as far as I can remember, a license started with an end date in mind. So if you go back to April of 2022, when Prism was first released, the day that product dropped, Fanatics announced that they had already secured the license at the end of Panini's current deal. So through the contract that was released publicly through the course of these filings, we saw that beginning in 2026, Fanatics would get this license back. So they're literally jumping the line here. And I think that that's really what rubs me like completely the wrong way, is that you've already won. Like they've already won in every way, shape, and form. They've already secured all the businesses. They've already cut off distribution with all the major distributors. They've already got their live breaking platform. They've already got the vault. They've already got the auction house. Like everything is already in process. They just wanted it to happen faster. And I think this was a test case to see how quickly and aggressively they could approach that. So if you think that a judge comes in and says, oh, temporary restraining order is granted, we're going to have a more formalized hearing 7 to 10 days down the road, that restraining order is granted, I would imagine that that roadmap is then applied to the NBA, the NFL, and every UFC, all of those different things. And I still believe that, in my opinion, those other licenses that are applied to this same sort of scenario, whether it's UFC, now the same company as WWE through the TKO merger, that license gets terminated very quickly. I would guess the NBA license gets terminated with Michael Rubin posting pictures on his Instagram of meeting with Adam Silver, the commissioner. I'm guessing the NFL license gets terminated quickly. Like all of those things are going to happen in rapid succession, and they're going to fight it in the courts. Now, there could be, from what Paul was saying, 12 to 15 months worth of litigation. But I said in our other video that really the strained business relationship of two parties going through litigation and still having to work together over the course of this license is not a favorable one. I fail to see how that becomes a relationship that gets back to where it was. And I think if you go back to our video, like Paul Anand, who Wrestling Card Price Guide, there's two Pauls here, was saying how successful the Panini experience has been over the last however many months of their license, and really since the beginning of Prism. Like that specific aspect of it was all heavily documented in their filings and saying, we've overperformed our minimum guarantees, which is the royalties that Panini has to pay WWE in usage of the license. We've smashed everything that we needed to smash. We have communicated everything we need to communicate. And I think that that's really where they were shocked to see that this comes down to not offering digital cards, not offering a trading card game, not doing the things that could eventually sink this termination. That's the reading through the license. It's really odd. So, I mean, there's clearly loopholes here that I think Fanatics will exploit. Both sides are going to have probably very expensive lawyers, both from WWE's and their infamous legal counsels. Fanatics probably advising in some way, shape, or form. There's a lot of things to be sorted out. Here is what I don't get. The overall wrestling card hobby doesn't seem to care about any of this. They seem to look at this strictly from a very narrow point of view. And I understand kind of why that's the case. If you look at how most wrestling collectors exist, most of them don't really dive into other sports. They don't really see how a total consolidation of trading cards would really impact them because really they only collect wrestling cards. Or if they do have impact in baseball, football, basketball, whatever, a lot of them are just looking like, hey, I just want to know what's happening with my specific redemptions, my relationship with my shop, all the different people I talk to on Facebook who trade and buy and sell cards with. Like that's really the way that this is entering their thought process. I mean, if you disregard all of the shouting and yelling and crazy stuff that's been said, like, and you really get down to the meat of it, the average collector really only cares about how this is going to impact them. And I don't think that most of them can see far enough into the future to see how a consolidation plan like this could potentially impact their collecting experience. And the reason I say that is because most of the consolidation is going to happen on the periphery. It's going to happen to things that they expect are going to be not impactful to their overall collection. Things like a live breaking platform. Right now, Whatnot exists. Right now, there's opportunities to use other platforms. Maybe that changes in the future. Fanatics Live is the only place that you can do live breaking. Maybe they feel like going back to Tops, things are going to change with the number of redemptions that exist in a product. I don't think that any of that is really going to happen. Panini is a very unpopular company. Like I really didn't like Panini coming into the WWE license. I had very low expectations. And the reason for a lot of the hate that Panini gets is because of the way that they function within the hobby. They've come in very much like like Fanatics has. Back in 2009 and 2010, they went and took the NBA license and signed an exclusive deal away from Upper Deck, which was this beloved company that had produced some of the most wildly successful sets in the history of the hobby. They did the same for football in 2015. A lot of this plan was very similarly executed. And although they didn't go after things like grading or vaults or auction houses or anything like that, distribution, you name it, there was license consolidation for the first time. For a while, they had three of the four major sports with a PA license in baseball. So they had NFL, NBA, hockey, and an MLB PA license to allow them to make logo-less baseball products. So if you think back to license consolidation, this isn't the first time that particular plan has gone down. It's the surrounding everything else that is going to impact the way collectors have experience within the hobby. So things like the way the shops can continue to exist, because Fanatics has ended relationships with almost every distributor as of 1/1, 2023. Fanatics has continually put a stranglehold on a number of different aspects of the hobby, some of which haven't been felt yet. Some of them, they've just made the acquisitions. Some people have already lost jobs. Some people have changed the way that they're doing business. But I don't think we've seen the full aspect of what this is going to look like. And I don't think many collectors are really thinking about it like that quite yet. I think they will start to see some of the impact of the decisions that this consolidation plan is going to force. And I think when we look at the overall stake of what something like a license termination can do, really in the middle of the biggest merger in the history of wrestling, like that is insanity to me. Like I don't know how somebody has that much influence to be able to go into WWE and say cancel this license in the middle of this merger, and they did. Like that's the impact that Michael Rubin can have over a licensor because he runs merchandising for literally every sport that's out there. College, MLB, NBA, NFL, WWE shop is run by Fanatics. Like all of these things are now Fanatics experiences. NHL has stores that are run by Fanatics. MLB has stores that are run by Fanatics. NFL has stores that are run by Fanatics, just like all of this. And those are brick and mortar locations. So if we're saying that at some point in the future, there isn't some sort of slippery slope that's going to happen here, it may or may not be something that we see right away, but it's naive to believe that there won't be massive changes as this consolidation plan takes place. I don't think the people at Tops are really to blame for this. Like Tops is really a subsidiary of a greater corporate machine now. So I'm not putting the blame on Tops for doing this. And more importantly than that, I would love to see Topps come back to wrestling cards. I'd love to see Panini and Topps both have an opportunity to create wrestling cards. Topps Chrome, Topps Finest, Undisputed, Transcendent, all of those are hugely important products to wrestling, and they're massive parts of my collection. I all want those things to happen. But I think the greater consolidation plan and the monopolization of trading cards, as it seems, is an effective monopoly. Whether legally that's the case is still yet to be determined by this lawsuit. But there's so much here to consider that I don't think collectors are really considering. And if your local shop that you go to, or your Target, or your Walmart, or however you consume trading cards changes because of this consolidation plan, you may not see that right now, but eventually you could. And I think that's why having the influence to be able to terminate licenses, terminate contracts 2 years early is a really scary situation. It's never happened before in trading cards. So that alone was why I'm paying such close attention, and I'm sure why everybody else within the hobby, whether it's Upper Deck, whether it's Leaf, whether it's Panini themselves trying to figure out what's going on here, like that specific element of this is really keen to how this is going to play out over the next few years. Even scarier is that there's still other parts of the hobby that Fanatics is trying to consolidate. And, I used to think, well, maybe there's going to be a way that other things can find success in, sort of being the alternative. But when you cut off and you bully some of these other aspects of the hobby into leaving, that's controlled by the government. That's where the FTC steps in. That's where this SEC may step in. There's other things here within the antitrust lawsuit that even if WWE ends up winning this lawsuit and terminates the license because they didn't do a digital trading card, there are other aspects of the legal proceedings that won't be sorted out anytime soon that could have impact on whether Panini sticks around and gets some of this back, or whether exclusive licenses are deemed just not able to be done anymore. So when a license like this goes down with Panini signing an exclusive deal, then it's going to Fanatics, or similar things are happening in baseball or whatever. It usually is a 3 to 4 year deal. We saw here their deal went from 2022 effectively to the end of 2025. So that was part of the license document that was shared publicly. What is crazy to me is that when Fanatics enters into the equation for baseball and football and basketball, they're not leaving. Like it's a humongously long license, because as I've said before in other videos, when Fanatics had funding rounds in seeking out capital to build their business, the leagues were part of those funding rounds. So I think like there's a lot to be determined here of how Fanatics does business in terms of merchandising for all of professional sports. And just to say, well, I hate Panini, I hate redemptions, screw all these guys that are hyping up all this other stuff. I just want Topps back. Like, I don't think people are fully understanding what that is going to mean, especially if Topps is now entering in at the same amount of money that Panini was paying for this license. Because we can assume that based on the royalties that are owed through the remainder of the contract being around $5.6 million and change, this was a $10 million contract. When this was signed back in 2022 and went into effect back in 2022, I said that was probably triple what Topps was paying for the WWE license originally. So Panini came in and just said, we see the future of WWE being bigger. We're going to offer you 3 to 4 times what Topps was paying for this. And now Topps is going to come in and have to pick up the slack in a lot of those areas. If you think that everything is going to snap back to the way that it was in 2017 and 2018, I think you're very wrong. And I think there could be a huge variety of different things that Topps could do differently than Panini. But the aspect of redemptions, the aspect of cost of entry for some of these products, the way that products are built and distributed and all these other things, I don't think that goes back to the way it used to be. And I think people need to come to terms with that, because the cost of a license is more expensive. And when a license is more expensive and your minimum guarantees and royalties that you have to pay goes up, that means that everything has to change in the way that you build a product, the way that you solicit a product, the way that your dealers sell a product, the way that your shops sell a product, all of it. And that's what's going to turn everything on its head for Topps, the way that it wasn't the case back in 2019 and 2021 when this was really the beginning of the boom in wrestling cards. Now, additionally, there weren't live breaking platforms back then, so the cost of these products was significantly dropped because the audience was smaller. Panini brought a ton of people to wrestling cards. The value of wrestling cards, especially in the shiny cards, has gone up dramatically. So the ability to buy $60 Chrome boxes ended in 2020. Those things went from a $60 pre-order to a $180 box very, very fast. And I think that right now, a $180 box of Prism is standard. I think a $180 box of Chrome is probably going to be standard too. So I think like we're going to have a lot of expectations changing around the hobby, around what the value of a wrestling card is going to look like comparatively from Topps and Panini. I don't think that Topps really has the value spectrum that Panini does, but they definitely have a lot of people who are looking for Topps to come back, myself one of them. I just don't think that the landscape is going to be identical to what it was back in 2017, 2018, when we were ripping cases at $400. Similarly with Undisputed, things like that, we're not even sure what the product calendar would look like. We're not sure if Transcendent comes back, but there were like redemptions in every year of Transcendent. Like I waited a year and a half for the Becky Lynch Superfractor, which was a redemption in 2021 Transcendent. And I almost didn't get it. So, I mean, like there's a specific format to the way autographs are received through WWE. A lot of it isn't determined by Topps or Panini. And I think that complaining about the process that Panini was using, they probably took a lot more risks around who they were willing to put a redemption in a product for. Topps has historically been a lot more conservative, but thinking that there's not going to be any redemptions in Topps products is probably a pipe dream. I think what is going to be a different sort of outcome is Topps has stability. Topps is going to be a stable company that will be around as a subsidiary of Fanatics in the hobby. They're not going away. And so the idea that this redemption will eventually be expired is still a factor, but that it won't be filled within the time period because the company goes away is probably not as much of a factor. So I think we have to really take an inventory of how we react to some of these news, especially from people who are just out for hate and out for just battles and just want to see everything burned to the ground because they hate Panini or because they hate this or they hate that. What I think we're trying to do on Wrestling Trading Cards and really with this channel is help people get an understanding of why things are the way that they are and give the context of the greater hobby and how they have come to be the way that they are. And I think as we go through some of the most challenging times in wrestling cards that I think I will have ever seen, there's going to be a lot of misinformation out there. I've already seen a ton of it on Facebook. I've seen a ton of it on Twitter. I've seen videos just of the most ridiculous statements I've ever seen. A lot of those things are said for specific reasons. And it's going to be up to you to sort through where you can trust the information coming before you and where you need to sort of reevaluate the validity of what those individuals are saying, whether it's, some guy on Facebook who says, every product from Panini is going to be pulled off the shelves. That's not true. Whether it's a guy who's saying all of your redemptions are now null and void, that is also not true. But I think in understanding of what information is partial truth versus partial lies versus this and that, and I think that's the world that we live in. That's the new world order of social media. And I think that as long as we're going to be wrestling fans and as long as we're going to be wrestling card collectors, this is the new life until things settle down, which could be, from what Paul was saying, 12 to 15 months down the road to get the full extent of this litigation sorted out. So as we get going through this, stay tuned to this channel. Make sure to subscribe. We're going to be doing a lot of different content on things like what to expect when Topps comes back, what may happen if both companies are producing content at the same time, what are we expecting as values change between Topps and Panini, or as Panini moves on and Topps comes in, where do we see things falling? Like, all of that stuff is going to be covered in depth on this channel. And we're not going to be the ones that are going to be out here yelling and shouting at people. We're going to be doing this to help you guys understand how these things work within our hobby. We're going to be doing it here with the understanding that we're trying to inform and educate with a greater context so that people can take that and really materialize it within their collections. We're collectors too. We're passionate individuals. We're wrestling fans. I watch wrestling every week. So I think it's something that, as we get going and as we share our opinions on whether we like something or don't like something, whether we feel this way or speculate on this or that or the other thing, you can trust that, when we're doing this, we're doing it with the sake of the best sort of progression of the hobby as best we can. That's why we started doing these videos. That's why we've gotten such a positive reaction. That's why I've gotten so many messages about the different busy videos that we've already done. And I'm so excited to be able to cover this. And please do yourself a huge favor and follow Paul Lesko on Twitter. He's been covering a lot of the legal aspects of this. A lot of the information that I've gotten has been directly from him. So I think as a lawyer, he's covering a lot of this directly with a legal context. I'm trying to sort of flush this out from an implications perspective for the greater hobby. Overall, I can't say enough good things about the coverage that he's provided. Stay tuned all around. There's going to be so much to come. Can't tell you how excited I am to see how this all sorts out, especially as we start to figure out whether or not the courts are going to agree with WWE or Panini, which could come probably in the next few months. So stay tuned. Thanks again.